Not My First Language, a memoir. Written and read by Reena Arora-Sánchez. Six. Over the next few weeks, that man and I picked a date. July 2nd, 2015. His semester would be over by then, and he could request vacation from his planned summer job in the marketing office at his university. It would also give him time to save money. We chose a hotel. He went with a friend to make sure it met my expectations. "Wow, this place is amazing, babe," he marveled during a video call from a 4-star facility across from Pereira's transportation center. "Even with all the buses, it's so quiet here. Oh, and air conditioning. Oh my God, these rooms are so big." Who was more excited at that point, him or me? As the days passed, I realized that this international trip was going to be different from so many I'd taken before. I wasn't exploring for exploring's sake. This time, my itinerary was filled with purpose. Purpose that could change the trajectory of my life, much like those who came before me. If not for my immigrant great-grandparents who crossed oceans for the chance of a better life, would I be here? If not for my grandfather's traumatic adulthood, would my father have been encouraged to leave India? If not for the dozens and dozens of flights I'd taken with my parents all over the world in my lifetime, would I feel as secure as I did about heading overseas alone? To a country where English was not the first language? Spanish not my first language? My ancestors had turned suffering into opportunity. What would I do with it? If I'd learned anything in the years leading up to 2015, it was that relationships are complicated. Everything seems fresh and possible in the beginning when you barely know a person. There's chemistry, hope, dreams for the future. But who was that man, really? What would it feel like to hug him at the airport after 13 hours of traveling? What would he smell like? How would he treat the staff at a restaurant? What would catch his attention on the street? Were we as attracted to each other as we thought? Or would the chemistry we had over devices not translate to the real world? As much as I wanted to lose myself in the fantasy of a future with a handsome foreigner, I needed to stay grounded. I'd been here before, on the cusp of a new relationship that appeared to have all the potential in the world, only for that fantasy to implode when the person turned out to be someone else. Back in 2011, before I'd said yes to an invitation from W, I was at a networking event with a friend of mine in Uptown Charlotte when 2 handsome, well-dressed executives approached us and struck up a conversation. One of them I'll call E, a mid-30s entrepreneur with an impressive career track developing websites for lucrative businesses. His financial success was impressive, but what struck me was his energy, his vibration. His warm demeanor was welcoming and open, his body language soft and relaxed. It was clear to anyone watching that something was forming between us. "Oh gosh, I've got to run. I've got dinner plans," I noted regretfully after a couple of hours of effortless conversation on that rooftop bar. "It was so nice talking to you," I assured him. I meant it, but I hesitated to ask if we could stay in touch. E's eyes softened behind his transition lenses. His gentle demeanor radiated from the body of an American football player, well over 6 feet tall, muscular, and hands that could shatter the comically small cocktail glass cradled in his palm if he were a different kind of man. "Hey, I get it, you're a busy woman," he chuckled. I giggled back. Was I supposed to do something here, or was it okay to walk away? "Could I get your number, maybe take you for a drink sometime?" he finally asked before I could. "Yes," I blurted out. I cleared my throat. Surely I hadn't meant to sound so eager. Must be something caught in there. "Yes," I repeated more delicately this time. A few days later, we found ourselves at a bar in Charlotte's South End, swapping stories about our lives over red wine and vodka sodas. E shared that his mother and father had both passed away, something inconceivable to me at the time. I told him about my dreams of someday walking into a building with my name on it instead of someone else's. He affirmed how freeing it was to have the independence of an entrepreneur, and so forth. He didn't kiss me goodnight. He was somehow able to resist the most enticing red lipstick that covered my full, heart-shaped mouth. Or perhaps he was simply a gentleman. We texted on and off for a few weeks after that, but our connection slowly dissipated, and I moved on. To W. This is where the jump cut to the next scene would read, 3 years later. I'm not interested in being in a relationship right now, W insisted after we'd bumped into each other at a mutual friend's housewarming party. I don't know how polite hellos evolved into a deep discussion about our past and the future on the back porch of that Palisades home, but it did. If you're in a place to date, you should do it, he said. I could say that I'm not sure why I thought we deserved any sort of chance at rekindling our spark after what went down in February. But today, I know it was because I was afraid. Afraid to be alone, afraid that I was giving up something that would get better with time, afraid of starting over with someone else, afraid of choosing faith over fear. But his insistence was the push I needed to finally let go. Not long after that sweltering Carolina summer evening, an acquaintance of mine shared via social media that her successful small business was celebrating its second anniversary. One of her restaurant clients was hosting a party in her honor. Another young entrepreneur living the life I thought I wanted. One of the things I loved about Charlotte in the mid-2010s was that it was a small, big city filled with transplants from other parts of the United States. Circles were tight but mighty and offered barely a degree of separation from your next connection. And everyone I met seemed to be genuinely supportive of everyone else's success. It was a great place to start a career and build a network. I, too, was motivated by another woman fulfilling her dream of financial independence. So I decided I'd stop by the restaurant to see her in person and pick her brain about her journey. I shared the post about her party on LinkedIn just before seeing an update in my feed from E about something he'd also done at work. Well, that's a face I haven't talked to in a while, I said to myself. I sent him a short congratulatory note about his career milestone, just to show I hadn't completely forgotten him. After all, we hadn't ended on bad terms. We just weren't in the same place after that first night out 3 years earlier. Suddenly, he was back in my purview. The timing felt different from 2011. It felt right. Thanks for the kind words, E messaged me privately. Are you going to the event next Thursday? Referring to the invite I'd shared on my feed. Hey you, hope all is well, I replied, trying to seem aloof. I was thinking about it, I continued. I know her in passing, and though we've tried, we've never actually met in person. I thought her event would be a great opportunity to finally connect. Were you planning to go? Well, since you posted it, it looked like something worth checking out to meet others in the industry, he wrote back. And first round on me if you decide to come, plus I need to know at least one other person there. First round on him? That sounded like a second date. The storm clouds from my previous relationship were finally shifting. I caught a much-needed glimpse of sunshine on the horizon. I couldn't say I'd fully healed, but I was ready to put myself out there again. E was pushing 40, which seemed so old to my 27-year-old self, and made it clear during our first meeting that he did in fact want to settle down someday and have a family. So our values were aligned. Maybe the universe was conspiring to get us back in the same room so we could see just how perfect we were for each other after all. What a cute story to tell at our wedding reception, I thought. A few days later, I arrived at the celebration in a gray Empire waist dress, lavender blazer, and black heels that elevated me to nearly 6 feet tall. My hope was that I'd struck a balance somewhere between professional and sexy so that E would take me seriously but also find me attractive. I made my way to the bar and ordered a vodka tonic with extra lime, my go-to drink at the time, introduced to me by my dear friend Jennifer. I took a sip and checked my blazer to make sure nothing had spilled. That's when the intrusive thoughts surfaced. What if E didn't show up? Just because he said it was an interesting event didn't mean he'd actually come. He had no obligation to show up. He didn't even know the woman being honored. I paused, my gaze frozen on the shelves of liquor and various mixers within arm's length of the bartender. Brand names melted together. I suddenly couldn't tell the difference between tequila and grenadine. Seriously, what if he didn't show up? Was I wasting my time? Again? This is another part where I'd shake my younger self and tell her she was supposed to be there to support another woman, not to get a man's attention. Come on, dude, this is not about him. You know that, I'd tell her. At any rate, I didn't have long to ruminate on the question of his attendance. As I heartily congratulated the guest of honor on everything she'd built over the past 24 months, I caught a glimpse of E entering the bar from the corner of my eye. Just as handsome as I'd remembered. "Hey, you," he greeted me warmly, enveloping me in the bar stool before I had a chance to get up and greet him properly. "Hi," I grabbed him back, lingering for just a second longer than I should have. Our conversation seemed to continue from where it left off 3 years ago. More work talk, updates about what we've been doing since our last meeting, promising not to allow the same amount of time to pass before we made it happen again. Before we knew it, happy hour was winding into dinner hour. Hey, I don't know about you, but I could eat. E patted his stomach above his crisp white shirt, his expression eager yet unsure of whether I'd had enough of him by that point. I laughed my most flirtatious laugh, confident things were going to be different this time. I could eat too, I assured him. After saying goodnight to our hostess, E and I headed to a local Cajun restaurant not far from the first venue. Wow, this vehicle definitely puts my Corolla to shame, I joked as I clipped my seatbelt in his black Audi with all the luxury trimmings. I love this car, he mused. It's great for day trips. We should do one sometime, maybe Greenville or the Appalachian Trail. You ever been there? I was already on an emotional high upon realizing that our initial chemistry was still very much intact, so I was certain the reason he suggested a trip together was because he liked me too. Why else would he already be asking me to mark my calendar for a Friday in the not-so-distant future? Wine and conversation flowed as freely as it had at the bar. While we debated between jambalaya or shrimp and grits, E noted how much he loved to cook. That sounded great to me because I hated it. As much as I wanted to learn how to make my favorite Indian dishes, the joy in the process of preparing food eluded me. Finding recipes, shopping for precise ingredients I might never use again, trapping myself in the kitchen for hours to put it all together, then having to clean up. No, thank you. The whole process felt like a waste of time for my single self. Isn't that what restaurants are for? To pay someone who enjoys the art of making food? It's good for the economy, at least. E had a different perspective. He talked about cooking a meal for his neighbors, one of whom was a professional chef, and them being so impressed that they encouraged him to take it up as a career. Oh, sure, I retorted, turning my head to the other patrons in the restaurant as if they were listening to our conversation. Is there anything this guy can't do? I joked. I might have been a little tipsy by then. I swear, he insisted with a hushed whisper. I promise I can back this up. How about the next time we get together, I cook for you and prove it? Music to my ears. That sounds amazing, I said. We clinked glasses. E later drove me back to my car where the night had begun and gave me a hug, vowing to make good on his promise to have me over for dinner soon. But I wanted to do something special for him too, something I'd rarely done for others. No, dear listener, not that. Get your mind out of the gutter. Despite all her attempts to hold off until I was married, my mom had briefly flipped through a recipe book with me and stopped on some of the pages of my favorite Indian foods. Dal, butter chicken, saag paneer. These homemade dishes had brought so many people together throughout my lifetime. And even though I wouldn't call myself an expert in the kitchen, I wanted to cook them for E. If I really think about it, the act of cooking is not actually inconvenient. It's intimate. Preparing food for someone is an act of devotion. At least, it was to my mother. She wasn't physically affectionate throughout my childhood. She rarely offered hugs and kisses or reached out for our hands. Instead, she poured her feelings into nourishing us. Maybe that's why I was so selective when it came to cooking. In our family, food was more than fuel. It was tangible proof that you were loved. The weekend before our date was consumed with calls to my mom and trips to Patel Brothers. Did I have the right equipment, the right spices, the right measurements? Wait, Mom, what's the ratio of water to chickpeas again? How do you make the chole flavorful but not too spicy? There were no formal recipes to follow. My mother had been indoctrinated into my father's family by watching and learning as her sisters-in-law tossed handfuls of this or a dash of that to delectable North Indian comfort dishes that she would master over time. Doesn't matter, they'd say, as long as it tastes good. And it did taste good. Guests who attended my parents' dinner parties over the years could hardly believe that this white lady from Queens, the descendant of Irish, German, and Eastern European immigrants, could whip up dal makhani and goat curry with the best of them. "This is delicious," my dad's colleagues would comment as they graciously accepted seconds. "Who catered this?" "Nobody," Dad would proudly proclaim. "Michelle made it." "Just put in as much as you like," Mom told me as I continued grilling her on the consequences of using tablespoons instead of teaspoons. As much what? I thought, ashamed of how little I knew about preparing my own people's cuisine. I'd certainly eaten enough of it over the years. My cozy townhouse nestled against the South Carolina border was made cozier by the smells of home when E arrived that Saturday night. I surveyed the kitchen for one last check on my dishes and noted the frozen roti dough waiting to be cooked on the stove. "Don't make them too far ahead of time," Mom insisted. "Roti is better when it's fresh." That much I knew. I felt stunning and confident in a navy blue top and short denim skirt, not to mention relaxed as I sipped on a glass of Cabernet. I quickly guzzled the last few drops when I heard the doorbell, checking my reflection in the bathroom mirror to be sure I hadn't spilled any on myself. I took a deep breath and shook out my hair before opening the door with an enormous smile. "Hello, you," I greeted him in my most unbothered voice. E politely hugged me before I invited him to the dining room table. Not only was my mother a great cook, but she was an impeccable entertainer. "You should never delay serving hot food to guests," she showed me. "A good hostess ensures everything is ready to be plated shortly after everyone has arrived. But first, you offer them a beverage, of course." I playfully warned E about all the fantastic family dishes in which he was about to indulge. I was proud of the effort I'd put in and wanted him to recognize it in return. "But don't take my word for it," I joked flirtatiously. "I'll of course await your expert opinion since you're the culinary genius here." E laughed nervously and adjusted himself in one of my wooden chairs, dragging it slightly on the white carpet to get closer to the table. He put his hands in his lap and looked up at me standing next to him, ready to serve. Something was different. Was it? Or was I drunk already? No, I'd only had one glass. It couldn't have been that. "Not too much for me," E insisted, as if he were addressing a restaurant server offering to add tableside grated Parmesan to his pasta. "I'm watching what I eat, so only a little. Thank you." Only a little? What? I'd spent days preparing a lavish meal, a meal we had discussed more than once in anticipation of this evening, and now he didn't want it. Desire rapidly evolved into disappointment. "Sure, don't bother to warn me that you're on a diet or anything ahead of time," I thought to myself. I wouldn't allow the vibe du jour to permeate the entire evening, though. Maybe there was more to the story. Maybe he'd been sick and was too embarrassed to tell me. Or perhaps he had a rough day. I mean, how well did I really know this guy? Enough to understand how something out of my control could affect his mood? Definitely not. Anger was futile. It's fine, I can freeze the leftovers, I told myself. More for me, I guess. I forced a smile and tried to calm my doubts before taking the short walk into the kitchen. I had never cursed my open floor plan until this moment. What I wouldn't give for a door. I totally understand, I finally replied from the other side of the counter as graciously as I could muster. Some days you don't want to overdo it, right? I continue as I turned on the stove to warm up the roti. Not sure why this had to be the day, though, I thought. I mentally assured myself that, in the grand scheme of things, this wasn't the worst that could have happened. Eve had willingly come to my house, ready to enjoy another night. I should be grateful for this opportunity to spend more time together. After all, we were still just getting to know each other. I'm actually trying to watch my portions too, I continued. I pulled a hot roti off the stove and delicately laced both sides with butter before resting it on one of my grandmother's old plates. A second began to bubble as the dough met the warm pan. Would you like some wine? I asked. I just realized I hadn't offered him anything to drink before busying myself in the kitchen. I'd been too distracted by his attitude. Whoops. Sorry, Mom. E turned his head to the right to make eye contact with me from the dining table, the gears in his mind seemingly turning. I'm actually staying away from alcohol as well, he revealed. But thanks. That was also new, given how influential alcohol had been in our past interactions. Not that one needs it to have fun, but seeing as he had no qualms about drinking with me before, I wasn't sure how to take that response. Well, I guess I'll give myself a refill to make up for it, I giggled, pouring myself more Cabernet. I was still holding out hope for a magical evening. Dinner passed pleasantly enough. E stuck to his small portions and didn't ask for seconds, but he praised me to the heavens and mentioned how well I'd married all the flavors. I thought about our last conversation at Cajun Queen, where he'd lamented not wanting to wait much longer to be married and start a family. Where did that guy go? When the table was cleared, we moved over to my living room, where I made it pretty obvious that I wanted him to get comfortable and join me on the sofa. Instead, he parked himself down on the floor and leaned against my love seat, perpendicular to where I was sitting, stretched and yawned. Yawned. Perhaps it was the 3 glasses of wine or the fullness of my belly, but that yawn sure did test my faith in where this was going. I turned on the TV to drown out the fact that our chemistry was fading. In my Steel Creek home, he simply wasn't the same attentive, bubbly man who'd wooed me all over the rest of Charlotte. Scenes from A Walk to Remember flashed before us, and we casually exchanged theories about what might have happened to Mandy Moore's career before he decided to call it a night around 11 p.m. Oh, so early? Are you sure? I asked. E insisted he was just tired, which I took for code as, I'm bored. That damn yawn. But what choice did I have? I walked him to the door like a good sport. E paused and embraced me. I was shocked at the level of affection from someone who'd expressed so little emotion over the past 3 hours. He held on tight for a beat longer than he should have, then looked into my eyes and smiled as he released me. I was certain he was preparing to go in for a kiss this time. I braced myself. Here it comes. At least we'll both have the same breath, I guess. He made his move. I stayed motionless, not wanting to interfere with the moment. Then, it came. Another hug. It wasn't a kiss, but it was nice, so I accepted it for what it was and said goodnight. Better not to rush these things, I assured myself as I cleaned up. We texted here and there in the days that followed, but after that, I would not hear from E for well over a month. Then, a year. Nearly 12 months after I'd painstakingly cooked my family's sacred dishes for him in the comfort of my home, E insisted he hadn't forgotten his promise to reciprocate. But by then, I had. This chapter reflects my personal recollections and is not intended to serve as a factual record. Memory is imperfect, and others might recall events differently. Certain names, details, and dialogue have been altered or reconstructed for clarity and privacy.